Hey guys, what's up? Alright, so what I did here, this is just a little bonus I'm gonna throw in. This is the part 2 deep dive, but this time I didn't add anything to give any hints. I just put the link and I asked it to do a deep dive. Then, just for shits and giggles, I did the debate. For them to do a debate about it, if what I've done since I started, this, that, and the other thing. Basically, a debate about my show, and I thought it was funny. They're both like 20 minutes long. I think the deep dive's 23 and the debate's like 20-ish. Either way, I'm going to share the debate right now, and then I'll share the deep dive. It's the last time I'm doing this, I promise, with this. But anyway, here we go. This will be the debate. Next up, you'll be hearing the deep dive. I hope you guys find this interesting, because the one good thing about it is the debate, it's two different podcasters. The voices are different. But anyway, less talking, let's get it. Here we go. Oh, by the way, I will be shortening the opening of the song. So for now, here we go.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Been noticing real quick fashion in a hurry. I need to dismantle my brain to get this 10-track album out by the first. I tried to be a hero, but then I realized very quickly that I will probably die before. I made a song in here, quick, fast, quite perfectly, 100% clear for you all to hear. This for flow that I'm about to lay down, but no doubt, no diggity. Put the swiggity on Jimmy to the east side forever. I ride and die, and make sure you heard that right. I didn't say no dignity, I said no diggity, like no doubt. I'll be the one you be talking about. It's here is a fucking song for you and me, future dwellers. Beware before you become a part of my understanding. Ha 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 ha. Okay. Let me stop, hit the beat, get back to the drip drop of this plot, so I can walk it back and pretend like I know what to expect from you puppets on a string. It's about those American dreams mixed in with some philosophies. How bad I would love to be, even though I'm a cowardly person, and I would like to maintain from any kind of violence / to form my ties. But first I had to formulate up a bridge, you see, for all you good people to hear my lyrical misses and dishes with flows, and whoever the fuck really knows what's really going on around here.
It is now time to explain to people just what's wrong with me.
If I ask you, to what end? Dread it, run from it, destiny arrives all the same. And now it's here. Or should I say, I am.
Welcome to The Debate. Today we're digging into the work of Jimmy James, specifically The Jimmy James Show A to Z. It's quite a body of work. We're talking 5 years, 2020 to 2025, 281 episodes, and what's fascinating is how James himself describes it. Terms like insanity at its finest, processed bullshit. He even calls himself the host who brings you insanity.
Right.
Yet at the same time, he specifically pitches the show as helpful, even crucial, for folks dealing with things like ADHD, anxiety, OCD, things he says he deals with personally. So the big question, I think, is this. Does this really raw, unstructured, authentic approach actually function as effective connection, maybe even therapeutic support, especially for neurodivergent listeners? Or does leaning so heavily on insanity, as he puts it, ultimately undermine its usefulness and consistency? I'm going to argue that the chaos is actually its strength, proof that it works.
And I'll be taking a, let's say, slightly different perspective. The longevity, 2020 to 2025, that's definitely notable. You have to give him that. And his openness is, well, it's certainly there. But I believe the very lack of structure, this constant self-criticism you mentioned, it creates a kind of conceptual instability that really gets in the way of its claim to be a reliable mental wellness resource. I mean, when the creator himself calls his work something like master bullshit manipulator content, it introduces so much noise that it might just, confuse or even overwhelm the very audience he's trying to reach. People who often really need clarity, especially with anxiety or OCD.
Okay, but let's unpack why that rawness, that transparency, might be precisely what works. James is incredibly explicit about linking his own mental state to how the show is put together. He says he's just an idiot who talks on his phone, right? And he connects the whole A to Z concept directly to his neurodivergence. He actually says, alphabetically, associate that with ADHD and my mental disease, basically 1 + 1 = me. Now, imagine you're someone struggling with ADHD, or maybe chronic anxiety, feeling isolated. Hearing that level of self-disclosure, that direct connection, that's incredibly validating. It's not just some marketing gimmick. It feels like real solidarity. And he's stuck with this for 5 years. His stated goal, he says, it's really about helping anyone out there going through a bad day in this weird world we all live in. That run, 2020 to 2025, shows serious commitment to that path. Those basement ramblings of a crazy person, yeah, they might include cursing, they might be unfiltered, but for some listeners, that's the validation. It says, hey, your messy internal world, that's okay. That's human. It's deliberately low pressure, highly authentic, and maybe that's exactly what appeals to people turned off by, super polished clinical self-help stuff.
That's a compelling point about the validation, I grant you that. But I'd frame the utility of it differently. Okay, the transparency is undeniable, but we really need to question if that structural volatility, the chaos, is practically helpful for the people he says he's targeting. He describes the content as covering everything and anything. That's the A to Z chaos right there. And yes, longevity proves he can consistently produce content over 5 years, but does it prove he's consistent in actually delivering support? If the aim is to help people with anxiety, with OCD conditions, often made worse by unpredictability, by noise, how does a platform that's so full of Jamie's own self-critique, his own conceptual static, actually provide help? He uses these really strong, self-deprecating terms, processed bullshit. It feels like unfiltered self-expression is taking priority over maybe more structured support. And this could lead to listener fatigue, or worse, it could genuinely confuse someone who's looking for actual coping strategies. Plus, look at the evolution, especially in the later years, say 2024, 2025. The focus seems to shift pretty significantly. He starts dedicating huge amounts of time to really niche things, like getting AI systems to analyze his poetry. That suggests to me, at least, that the show's main purpose might have drifted from community support towards, well, his own artistic validation.
I understand the concern about instability, but let me offer another way to look at that A to Z format, especially thinking about the ADHD audience, or people with executive function challenges. That nonlinear structure jumping between comedy and stories, movie quotes, worldviews, it might not be random noise. It could actually be a necessary reflection of the neurodivergent experience itself.
How so?
Well, think about it. The format could act like an intellectual pressure release. If you struggle with ADHD-related executive dysfunction, sitting through a very linear, structured wellness podcast, step 1, do this, step 2, do that, that can feel overwhelming, cognitively demanding. It might even trigger avoidance. But the A to Z approach, it lets the listener chill, relax, laugh, cry, and crucially, dip in and out without feeling pressured to follow a rigid path. It's like this hyperactive, varied stream that kind of mirrors how a nonlinear brain might work.
It offers companionship without demanding strict cognitive focus. He's not really prescribing therapy in a traditional sense. Maybe he's modeling a way to survive with the chaos.
I'm sorry, I struggle to accept that a complete lack of focus inherently translates to effective support for what is, let's be honest, often a vulnerable group. If the show explicitly targets people with anxiety and OCD, people who often thrive on routine and clarity, then branding your own show as a dose of insanity at its finest, that seems fundamentally counterproductive, doesn't it? The material says his goal is mental health and well-being, but if the delivery method is pure chaos, the listener is basically forced to sift through hours of unfiltered rambling to find maybe one useful nugget of support. And this leads us right into that specialized content that really starts showing up more in the later seasons, the raplet-style poetry, or rap bullets. This is where James seems to demand a very high level of engagement from the listener. He even admits this music part is exclusively for the certain listeners out there who are only tuning in for the rap-lit portion. So why inject this incredibly specific, complex art form, which he describes as rap battle-tested, highly structured lyrical analysis into a platform that's supposedly for general anxiety and ADHD coping? It feels like it creates a barrier, potentially isolating the broader audience rather than uniting them.
See, I don't view the poetry as a barrier at all. I actually think it might be the anchor of intellectual coherence within the chaos, and it could be a vital mechanism for a specific subset of listeners. The raplet poetry seems to be James's way of formalizing, of processing the sheer complexity of his internal world, the very mental disease, as he puts it, that he talks about. Think about a neurodivergent listener, maybe someone with high intelligence but struggles with internal disorganization. Hearing James take that internal noise, that intensity he links to his ADHD, and force it into this really rigid, complex lyrical structure, using shorthand and emotional swells with building intensities. That could be profoundly validating. He's demonstrating how internal chaos can be channeled into something coherent, something creative.
So when he says he relates to people with mentally challenged brains, maybe he's offering a kind of intellectual companionship, showing that chaotic thinking doesn't mean you can't produce something meaningful and intense.
I can appreciate the artistic argument truly, but if we track his evolution, especially from, say, 2022 onwards towards 2025, it really does feel like his artistic process starts to overshadow that stated mission of broad communal support. And the heavy use of external analysis lately really highlights this for me. Let's talk about the AI critique specifically. You see it in recent episode titles. He's feeding his personal work, his rap bullets, into large language models like Notebook LM, Gemini Pro 1.5. He's using these advanced AIs for cold analytical feedback on deeply personal stuff. Now, he frames it as wanting to educate the listener, show he's trying to get better with time. But the sheer amount of time and focus dedicated to this, it strongly suggests the primary driver has shifted towards maybe identity maintenance for himself, creative experimentation, rather than listener support.
I think that might be an overly cynical read on what could just be self-improvement in public. James seems to be showing a pretty sophisticated level of self-awareness by bringing these modern analytical tools into his process. He even explains it, saying something like, "I just added some of my music, asked it to critique it, and it did the rest. Weird, but it is. I like to share just to educate." This willingness to put his most vulnerable, personal work under the microscope of objective AI analysis, that demonstrates a kind of radical transparency about the often messy creative process itself. He's basically taking the listener along for the ride, showing them his active quest for improvement. This directly supports his claim of staying the same course but getting better with time.
For a listener who feels stuck because of their own mental health struggles, witnessing James openly wrestling with evolving his craft documented across hundreds of episodes and 5 years, that could be incredibly valuable. It might offer hope that improvement is possible, even if the journey there is, well, chaotic.
That's certainly a positive spin, but doesn't it create a fundamental contradiction with his core brand? He built this thing on being the raw basement ramblings guy. Now, if he's seeking validation from AI, and this is key, admitting he sometimes uploads the AI's breakdown before he's even listened to it himself, He says, I have not heard the Notebook LM or its breakdown of my WRAB bullets, so I try to keep a fair and open mind. Then who is this content actually for? Uploading unvetted AI analysis of his own lyrics feels like it serves the host's needs, his artistic process, his need for validation, far more than it serves the listener's need for consistent, maybe even vetted, content focused on emotional well-being. The growth we see from 2020 to 2025 is definitely there. It's intellectual, it's artistic, I'll give you that. But I argue it comes at the cost of the consistency you'd want for accessible mental wellness support.
Okay, I can concede that the format is, without doubt, structurally volatile. It demands a high tolerance for chaos from anyone tuning in, and yeah, that could definitely be exhausting for some.
And I will absolutely grant that Jimmy James has shown incredible transparency about his own struggles, ADHD, OCD, anxiety. And that 5-year run, 2020 to 2025, it is undeniably a testament to his commitment to sharing that raw, personal journey.
So we're kind of left with two ways to frame the Jimmy James Show A to Z. My position remains that the extreme rawness, the chaotic A to Z structure, that's its unique strength. It provides an authentic mirror, maybe a low-pressure anchor, for listeners who recognize that non-linear, neurodivergent experience in themselves. And his recent engagement with AI, I see it as documenting a vital, ongoing journey of public self-improvement.
Whereas I maintain that the reliance on this unstructured, self-proclaimed insanity, coupled with the growing focus on specialized artistic validation, especially using AI to analyze his complex poetry, it ultimately limits the show's reliability. It makes it conceptually unstable and therefore difficult to consistently depend on as a substantive resource for mental wellness, despite what are likely very genuine intentions from the host.
The fundamental question we haven't quite settled, I suppose, is whether this intensely personalized, often chaotic content actually manages to deliver on that core promise, to help anyone out there going through a bad day. Or does the inherent volatility of the all to a Z, I mean everything and anything approach, mean it ends up being more of a vortex than a stable anchor for its intended audience?
Exactly. And the sheer volume of material in the Jimmy James Show A to Z really forces listeners and us to weigh things carefully. There's the undeniable value of that raw solidarity he offers against, well, the potential risks of navigating such an unfiltered, constantly evolving, and deeply personalized form of digital broadcast. There's clearly much more to unpack in understanding the true impact of this really unique, multi-layered creation.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You send us the material, the articles, the research, the notes, and we provide the analytical shortcut. Today, we are undertaking, well, a really fascinating deep dive into a content ecosystem that's thrived for, half a decade now? Precisely because it embraces chaos. The Jimmy James Show AZ. Our mission here is to move beyond just the surface level, and really unpack the intentional value that might be hidden within this self-proclaimed madness. We're looking at a project where the creator explicitly identifies himself as the host who brings you insanity at its finest. So yeah, we need to analyze not just the humor and the stories, but how this unique kind of unfiltered style, which, let's be honest, runs against pretty much every piece of conventional podcasting advice, how it serves a specific and maybe underserved audience, particularly those dealing with mental health struggles, chronic anxiety, and neurodivergence like ADHD. This isn't just a content critique. It feels more like an examination of modern creative survival.
That framing is absolutely essential, I think. The show's longevity and its radical transparency. Those are its two most defining features, really. Based on the sources you provided, this deep dive seems structured around 4 critical pillars. First, the singular, completely exposed identity of the host, Jimmy James himself. Second, the pretty impressive 5-year evolution of the project. We're talking 2020 right through 2025. Third, this seemingly unrestricted AZ content mandate. What does that even mean? We'll get into that. And finally, his signature artistic creation, something he calls raplet-style poetry. And interestingly, how he started using technology to critique it. It's a remarkable case study, really, turning personal struggle into public and apparently quite enduring content.
Okay, let's unpack this first pillar then. The host, the brand, and yeah, that's surprising longevity.
Right, so the first thing that just jumps out from the sources is the total, unyielding accountability of the creator, Jimmy James. He isn't operating behind some production company or, a big team. Not at all. He explicitly states that everything you, the listener, hear is created by him, period. And this sense of personal responsibility, it seems so ingrained in his brand that he frequently signs off episode notes, trailers, public statements, you name it, with a very definitive, sincerely, Jimmy James.
Yeah, that signature. It's subtle, maybe, but it feels really crucial, doesn't it? In a media landscape just saturated with corporate voices, anonymous teams, that constant, almost theatrical sign-off, sincerely, Jimmy James, it feels like a deliberate signal. He's telling the audience they're getting the true, unfiltered source. He takes full, visible ownership of the whole insanity at its finest brand. It's definitely a risk, but you're right, it's also the promise of authenticity, isn't it?
And that promise, it gets validated almost immediately by the content mandate itself. The show is titled AZ, which you'd normally think suggests, structured topics, alphabetical order, or something like that.
Right, like a theme per letter or something.
Exactly. But the host clarifies that, for him, the AZ mandate means everything and anything. That's the direct quote. So this is basically a public declaration of complete creative freedom. It means one day might be a pretty serious discussion of worldviews, maybe politics, maybe social issues, and the very next day, it could be a segment purely dedicated to movie quotes, or him talking about his personal anxieties, or just telling random jokes. It's deliberately unbounded.
That lack of restriction, it's interesting. Almost a form of content creation that actively rejects the niche specialization that, algorithms seem to demand these days. He's deliberately saying, look, I will not be categorized easily.
Yeah.
The stated genre is comedy, featuring, and I'm quoting here, a distinguished taste towards comedy and stories about just anything that gets a laugh.
Okay.
But we really need to be clear for you listening. The show is aggressively categorized as explicit, rated R.
And that R rating, it isn't just incidental, it's practically part of the welcome mat. Jimmy James doesn't tiptoe around the explicit nature of the show at all. He invites the listener into his unfiltered world with this really aggressive humor, like promising they've just, quote, stepped in a world of bulls, so please wipe your shoes and take a fucking seat because this is a nice dose of insanity at its finest.
Okay, let's pause on that specific language for a second. The fucking seat line. This feels like the mechanism of that intentional chaos we mentioned. It immediately establishes a tone that's visceral, it's challenging, maybe even confrontational. Why do you think that aggressive, profane welcome is so vital to the brand he's trying to build?
Well, I think it creates this instant solidarity, maybe, with an audience that's just tired of polite, sanitized content. For someone who feels like they live in a noisy, chaotic, maybe anxiety-ridden internal world, a show that starts with an aggressive, authentic outburst like that, it can be deeply validating. It basically screams, hey, you don't have to filter yourself here, because I'm sure as hell not filtering myself. The profanity, the explicit rating, they almost serve as a filter themselves. They tell the person who's looking for polished corporate entertainment to probably go elsewhere. But at the same time, they're welcoming those who crave that raw human honesty, flaws and all.
And this radical honesty seems to have fueled some incredible staying power. Let's talk about the longevity, 2020 to 2025. 5 years is practically an eternity in independent content creation, right? Especially for a show that seems to defy all the usual industry norms.
Oh, absolutely. The sources confirm he's produced somewhere between 276 and 281 episodes in that time frame. That's a lot. And Jimmy James himself recognizes the weight of that number. He refers to it, quite pointedly, as a testament to my longevity of staying the same course, but getting better with time.
Getting better with time?
Yeah, and that's a critical distinction, I think. He isn't claiming to have become more polished or, professional in the traditional sense. He seems to be claiming that his skill at delivering his unique self, the insanity, the chaos, the honesty, that has improved.
And we see some of that evolution reflected in the sources, too. He mentions taking a much-needed break for almost a full year during that 5-year run.
Yeah, that break is really important context. It demonstrates the reality of trying to sustain this kind of high-energy, high-transparency, basically solo project. It wasn't some corporate hiatus planned months in advance. It sounds like it was a personal necessity. Burnout? Maybe. or just needing space. Yet he came back, and now apparently he's posting 1 or 2 new full episodes a week, promising a new look, same crazy show. And he's updating listeners on his, quote, journeys with podcasting going over 5.5 years at this point. So this constant chronicling of his own process, the breaks, the returns, the exhaustion, the learning curve, it gets integrated into the content, which you could argue only further deepens the connection with the audience. He's not just documenting the world, he's documenting the actual grind of being this kind of content creator.
Okay, this leads us directly to what I think is maybe the most important pillar of this whole analysis, the show's explicit mental health mandate. Jimmy James ties his personal experience, his neurodivergence, directly into the show's structure and its purpose. This is where it seems to move from just chaotic comedy into something closer to genuine peer support.
Precisely. His self-identification isn't just a footnote, it's like right there in the headline. He self-identifies right in the episode open, stating he is, and this is him, a crazy person with a splash of curiosity and a hint of OCD and a gigantic splash of ADHD.
Wow, okay, that's direct.
Extremely direct. By listing these conditions, OCD and ADHD, right up front, he's essentially establishing his credentials. He's positioning himself as a guide, maybe, through mental noise, someone who gets it.
And he immediately seems to broaden that personal experience into more of a public service mission. He states the show discusses, quote, things that include mental health and well-being, because honestly, it's really about helping anyone out there going through a bad day in this weird world we all live in. Ooh. So this isn't just accidental discussion of mental health cropping up now and then. This is framed as a core content focus.
Yeah. And if we connect this back to the listener, to you maybe, dealing with information overload or anxiety or feeling neurodivergent yourself, it's pretty clear the host is using his own conditions as a bridge. He is positioning himself as someone who truly understands the experience of having, in his words, a mentally challenged brain. Because he claims, quite provocatively actually, to be, quote, top of the food chain when it comes to that.
That's specific language. Claiming authority over the mentally challenged brain's descriptor.
Yeah.
It is pretty jarring, isn't it? Doesn't that kind of terminology risk alienating or even offending parts of the audience, even if he is claiming the term for himself?
It's absolutely provocative, I agree. But I think within the specific context of his brand, his whole persona, it feels more like an act of radical reclamation. He seems to be intentionally using language that society often weaponizes or pathologizes, right? Internalizing it and then amplifying it back out as a kind of badge of honor, maybe, a shared experience. He's creating a space where that kind of intense, sometimes messy, unfiltered internal monologue is validated. So for a listener who maybe feels isolated by their own neurodivergence or their anxiety, that extreme honesty, even with the potentially offensive language, it could actually feel revolutionary. It says, in effect, the things you are told to suppress or hide. That's exactly what makes us special here. That's what we talk about.
And he even analytically connects his condition directly to the show's format itself. He argues that his ADHD is basically the source code for the whole AZ content structure.
Yes, exactly. He offers this almost quasi-mathematical explanation for the chaos. He concludes, let's just take the word alphabetically and associate that with a ADHD and my mental disease, basically 1 + 1 = me.
1 + 1 = me. Wow.
It's profound self-analysis, really. He's saying the reason the show covers everything and anything is because that mirrors the rapid, nonlinear, high-energy thought process that can be inherent to ADHD. The show's structure, in this light, is literally an audio manifestation of his own brain chemistry.
So for the listener, you potentially get insight into what a neurodivergent mind may actually sound like on the inside, but presented in a digestible, often humorous way. He describes the style as, quote, basement ramblings of a crazy person where I sit down in my basement and basically start cursing.
And that aesthetic choice, the whole basement ramblings vibe, is such a deliberate rejection of polished commercial content, isn't it? It tells you, the listener, right away that this is low-stakes, high-authenticity stuff, no pretense. And the variety supports this. The rapid shift from, say, serious worldviews 1 minute to doing whose line is it anyway? Style movie, quote, segments or jokes the next. This constant variation, this rapid shifting, it could actually be a huge benefit for listeners who have attention deficit challenges themselves. It prevents deep cognitive fatigue because the topic is constantly refreshing itself. It almost mimics the very mechanisms of an easily distracted or maybe just highly associative mind. It feels like content created for the neurodivergent experience, not just in spite of it.
And the commitment he shows to the audience doesn't seem to stop just at the content either. He provides a kind of practical lifeline, too. He offers multiple email addresses, apparently, for people dealing with anxiety, ADHD, or other concerns. And he specifically encourages them to reach out with questions they might not feel comfortable asking family or friends about.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's moving into a really high level of peer support and transparency, isn't it? He's moving his platform beyond just entertainment or comedy and into something that feels more like a community resource, or at least an open door. This reinforces that idea that he's not some distant celebrity figure, but more like a fellow traveler, someone in the trenches with you. The show then becomes this potential non-judgmental conduit for listeners who feel overwhelmed or isolated by their mental health challenges. It offers a highly personalized form of validation and maybe even connection.
Okay, moving from the basement ramblings to his unique artistic creation, let's discuss this raplet-style poetry. This is presented as a distinct artistic outlet he performs and creates, sometimes even exclusively for specific listeners, which adds another layer of personalization and, well, intensity.
Right, the raplet. This seems to be where the show's intellectual curiosity, or maybe just its raw energy, meets its high-octane delivery style. He provides several different names or monikers for this form in the source material. Things like rap bullets or rap battle-tested, two-delay wit.
The terminology itself really suggests a fusion, doesn't it? Like rapid-fire hip-hop battle culture mixed with some kind of intense lyrical literature. Lit! Right.
We should probably try to analyze the structure he describes because it sounds specifically tailored to capture those emotional swells you might feel with anxiety or intense focus. He defines the form as sentences built out of shorthand and emotional swells with building intensities. What do you make of that? Well, if you think of it visually, maybe like an EKG readout of rapid thought, that might be one way. Shorthand implies brevity, urgency, fragmented ideas. Maybe like the rapid-fire thoughts that can sometimes overwhelm an anxious or ADHD brain. And then the emotional swells with building intensities, that suggests a deliberate escalation, a ramping up of emotional temperature within the lyric structure itself. So this poetry probably isn't meant to be calm or flowing in a traditional sense. It seems designed to be highly pressurized, maybe mirroring the experience of hyperfocus or frustration or rapidly escalating anxiety. It's like he's trying to give lyrical structure to internal emotional noise.
And this material is clearly a central part of his artistic identity. It's woven into episode notes, it gets its own trailers, like the amazing new Raplets trailer. But here's where he takes a really sharp turn away from conventional content creation, and this is fascinating. He's apparently outsourced the critique and reflection on this highly personal art form to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, this is genuinely revolutionary, I think, especially in the sphere of independent podcasting and, frankly, self-analysis. Jimmy James is actively using large language models, what we often refer to as LLMs, these powerful AI systems trained on just vast amounts of text data to understand and generate human-like language. He's using them to perform a deep dive on his own creative work.
Okay, so for you listening, we're talking about specific tools he actually names in the sources. Things like Notebook LM, Gemini Pro 1.5, and Copilot. These aren't just like, plugging terms into a generic search engine. These are advanced generative AI platforms. Why is he doing this, and how is he integrating their feedback or analysis or whatever it is?
It seems like he's using them as objective, almost analytical sparring partners. We see episode titles like Notebook LM tries to explain my rap bullets and more, or even Copilot versus Gemini and more. The sources indicate he's literally feeding his complex, often emotionally charged lyrics into these LLMs and then asking the machines to dissect the themes, the structure, the potential meaning. It completely externalizes the critique process. So instead of maybe struggling internally with self-doubt or waiting for a human critic who might never arrive, he brings in a machine to synthesize and analyze. It's pretty wild.
That episode where he apparently pitted Copilot against Gemini, having them break down a lyrical exchange, that is fascinating. But doesn't this raise some serious questions about creative integrity, or maybe even performance? Is this genuine self-reflection happening here, or is it just a really high-level gimmick to make his chaotic content seem more deliberately self-aware?
That's exactly the intellectual tension the show seems to thrive on, doesn't it? And Jimmy James provides a really interesting answer to that question, just through his own actions. He explicitly notes in the sources that he often posts these AI deep dives without listening to them first. He explains he tries to keep a fair and open mind.
Without listening first. Wow.
Yeah. That radical lack of filtration suggests it's maybe not primarily a performance, right? It points more towards an experiment in maximum transparency. He seems to be telling the audience, look, here is my raw, chaotic art. And here is a totally unedited machine analysis of it. You figured out alongside me.
So it kind of positions the AI not as some threat to his originality, but as this unusual, maybe objective co-host, or even a kind of digital therapist. By immediately sharing the machine analysis, warts and all, he just further reinforces the show's core promise: total, unedited honesty. Even when it's reflecting on his deepest, maybe most vulnerable creative output. It's an incredibly meta way to engage with the audience about the creative process itself.
And the current activity really demonstrates this process is ongoing. It's not a past experiment. We're seeing sources as recent as, well, yesterday, according to the notes, October 2024, showing he's actively using these LLMs as conversational partners in his reflection. The episode titled Notebook RM, and it's deep dive on me, El Mayo. I mean, the title says it all. He apparently asked the AI to look him up, provide analysis, and then shared his amusement at the results. It proves he really views the machine analysis as part of the fun, part of the process, part of the brand itself.
Okay, but let's step back for a minute and consider the viability and the potential drawbacks of this whole approach. We've established the chaos is intentional, yes, but in the highly polished world of digital content, isn't the sheer lack of editing, the aggressive style, isn't that fundamentally unsustainable? Particularly if he actually wants to attract mainstream advertisers, which he mentions.
Well, that's the great paradox, isn't it? For the conventional media consumer, or for a cautious advertiser, his approach, which he openly details, remember, even stating he might have doubled once or twice, so sorry about that, didn't going back and fix.
The typos or double posts.
Exactly. That kind of thing is definitely a major drawback. It signals a lack of traditional professional polish. Full stop.
Sure.
However, and this is the crucial part, for his highly specific target audience, those mentally challenged brains he speaks to directly, that very lack of polishing might be an essential feature.
Because it eliminates the pressure of perfection, makes it feel more real.
Exactly right. It reinforces the authenticity, the intentional chaos, the R rating, the casual use of profanity like bull. It's all designed to deliver those raw basement ramblings, not some sanitized, focus-grouped corporate product. You could almost argue that the very barriers that might keep mainstream advertisers away are the same filters that actively draw in the audience craving that specific unfiltered connection.
Okay, so if the potential drawback is the lack of traditional polish, what are the clear benefits rooted in that relatability and maybe genuine utility for the listener? What are the practical takeaways?
Well, first and foremost seems to be that relational connection. Listener reviews, according to the sources, frequently highlight the highly personalized nature of the content. One reviewer specifically noted that it feels like you're just having a conversation with him. That level of intimacy, that conversational tone, can be incredibly valuable for listeners dealing with feelings of isolation or anxiety. It offers a sense of shared space, perhaps, without the pressure of having to respond or perform socially.
And it sounds like beyond the potential therapeutic value and the comedy, there might be actual practical advice baked into some episodes, too.
Absolutely. One review specifically mentioned episodes containing good info on podcasting if you're thinking about becoming a podcaster. So that demonstrates that amid all the discussions of mental health and, everything and anything, he's also synthesizing his own 5+ year journey as an independent creator into actionable advice for others. So the show can potentially serve as both a mirror for personal struggle and maybe a rough roadmap for independent creative endeavor.
We should also probably acknowledge the sheer global accessibility mentioned. That seems to prove the demand for this kind of raw, unfiltered voice isn't just local. The show descriptions apparently confirm its reach across Africa, Asia-Pacific, Europe, Latin America, and North America. So this isn't just a local basement ramble hitting a small niche. It seems to be a global phenomenon built on this radical authenticity.
And finally, let's touch on his current business reality, because that adds a really crucial layer of context to his claims of authenticity. Jimmy James is actively accepting ads now, and he's completely transparent about the motivation behind this shift. He states, very bluntly, that he needs to start making money again because, quote, I have no other income except this, and this makes me nothing.
Wow. That really is the ultimate transparency, isn't it? He is explicitly telling his audience that this 5-year, nearly 300-episode labor of love, which seems to be his primary source of income and creative identity, is currently financially unsustainable. That's brave.
It is. And that financial vulnerability is key, I think. It positions him not as some slick, successful entrepreneur hiding behind algorithms and sponsorships, but as a passionate, perhaps struggling creator who is genuinely dependent on the support of his audience. This could potentially elevate that trust factor immensely. The listener isn't just consuming a product. They might feel like they're actively supporting a fellow struggler, trying to make an independent, unfiltered voice viable in a really challenging media ecosystem. Hashtag outro.
So, okay, let's try to bring this deep dive back together then. The Jimmy James Show AZ. It really doesn't seem to be merely a collection of comedy episodes, not at all. It feels more like a sustained 5-year public experiment in maybe public self-therapy, and definitely unfiltered creative expression. Jimmy James has brilliantly, or perhaps just instinctively, branded his own neurodivergence, his ADHD, his OCD, as the actual creative engine for his expansive, chaotic AZ content structure. He has consciously, it seems, rejected the need for commercial polish, and in doing so, created this space of radical relatability, particularly for listeners who feel maybe overwhelmed by polished media and the internal noise of anxiety, or just...
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here is the sheer audacity of merging really profound mental health advocacy with such raw, often chaotic content creation. This is a show that seems to be genuinely fueled by the very struggles it discusses. It's not just talking about them. Jimmy James positions himself very effectively as a relatable peer. He offers emotional validation through his own stream of consciousness, seemingly, and practical support through his direct engagement with his listeners' personal questions via email. The successful merging of the personal and the public, the chaotic and the supportive, it provides a really fascinating model, perhaps, for independent creators trying to find their voice moving forward.
And as we close out today's deep dive, the ultimate provocative thought for you, the listener, maybe builds directly on his really experimental use of technology. We have a host here who proudly proclaims his mental challenges. He actively uses powerful large language models, Notebook, LM, Gemini, Copilot, to critique his own art, to reflect on his identity. And then he posts that machine analysis, often without even listening to it first. So what happens to our concepts of originality and authenticity when the artist intentionally brings machine analysis into their rawest, most personal creative process? Is this the ultimate form of creative transparency for the 21st century? Or is it actually a new, hyper-aware layer of performance art? It's definitely a compelling question to consider the next time you encounter content that feels just maybe a little too real.
Wow, Jimmy James! That's quite an introduction. I can feel your passion and creativity pouring out. Here's a highlight of some key points and offer some feedback. Okay, then Jimmy the Great One. Of course, the AI did not say this. I must have added this in.
You're writing a philosophical, rap-inspired literary work, rap-lit, exploring the future of everything, humanity's impact on the planet and our place in it and the universe. You're passionate about sharing your thoughts and concerns about the world's resources, sustainability, and our species' role in the whole 9 yards. Your writing style is conversational, reflective, and poetic with a touch of humor. You're using this work as a way to process your thoughts, hopes, and fears about the world and our collective future. You're eager to share your ideas and inspire others to think critically about our impact on the planet. So yeah, I added this in, and to my surprise, I realized I could do better on these rap poetry songs. This is just the beginning, folks, stay tuned, and I'll be bringing more to you as the time ticks forward. And like always, take care of yourself and one another. Sincerely, Jimmy James, saying peace out for his first and only record drop. As Jimmy walks away, he smiles.